Hello, folks. Welcome to another edition of Inside the Marble Palace, Post Media Saskatchewan's look at Saskatchewan politics. I'm Murray Mandrick, political columnist for the Regina Leader Post, Saskatoon Star Phoenix. Joining me, Jeremy Symes, our political legislative reporter for the newspapers, and a familiar face, Adam Hunter, provincial affairs reporter for CBC in Saskatchewan. Hi, guys.
Hello.
I'm right.
We are talking about the NDP convention this week, and we are doing our post-mortem. Um, I guess it was basically what we expected. But let's start out with you, Jeremy. What surprised you about the numbers? What were the numbers? What kind of came forward that you weren't maybe expecting?
Yeah, absolutely. So we will start with the numbers. So Carla Beck got about 68% of the vote, and Caitlin Harvey got 32%. And I don't have the actual kind of number breakdown in front of me, but what kind of surprised me was how well Caitlin Harvey actually did. In a
Yeah,
way, she was a total newcomer to the scene. People have never really heard of her name before, and yet she still managed to get 32% of the vote. And this was a very short leadership race. So I mean, kudos to her for doing that. Her message was very different than Carla Beck. She was all about the environment, and that also stood out to me was her video, just how dire she was trying to make this situation seem for the province. So those were the standouts for sure. I guess I wasn't surprised that Carla won. I think a lot of people were expecting her to win, just because she is an MLA and she has some of that experience already. But yeah, I would say those two things for sure. And I guess Carla too. Really kind of making it known that she's here to kind of listen to people before maybe crafting some policy position. She has some ideas, but really she's all about going out first, talking to people before maybe making a stronger stance on things like the environment, for example.
Well, Adam, I guess let's get right back into it. We'll probably circle around back to what this means to the party when you have roughly 4,000 people actually casting a ballot and an admission that there's only around 7,000 and change in terms of actual party members. And I will circle back to that. But uh, I just like to get your input first in terms of what impact you think Harvey has had, did have on the NDP this entire race, and how problematic it might be, how lasting it might be. What was your sense, basically, from uh, uh, emerging out of the convention on the weekend? Plus, uh, Carla Beck announcing this morning a plan to go forward in which they're sounds like they're very much going to go to every corner of the province and solicit whatever votes they can find.
Yeah, they're really going to need the fuel tax breaks that the provincial government has been denying the people of the province of the NDP's request. I think that the party, in the leadership races, we see that there's these divisions and people are siding one side or the other. And when you think of the Sask party race, there were people within the caucus even that were siding with certain members. The majority were with Scott Moe, but there were those divisions. Even in the last NDP leadership race, you saw Trent Wotherspoon receive most of the caucus support compared to Ryan Miley, but Ryan Miley took more votes, and that vote was much closer than this one. The previous NDP leadership race was even closer. And so I would argue that this doesn't really show that there is a huge divide. I think there's always going to be a difference of opinion. If you watched Caitlin Harvey and you followed the convention at all, you followed leadership campaigns, they're quite different, Carla Beck and Caitlin Harvey. So there's always going to be this difference emerging. There was a very different message. As Jeremy mentioned, Caitlin Harvey's video was very dire. It was messaging to a certain part of the membership or part of the public that is very concerned about climate change. She was also talking about judicial reform. These are issues that Carla Beck didn't really engage with during the campaign at all. So that is always going to be a major difference between the two. I think the major takeaway I have is just the low membership numbers, as you mentioned. That is a huge, huge issue for the NDP. When you look at the last leadership race, of course, there was more time. You had two MLAs. You had Ryan Miley, who had run a couple times and lost. Trent Wotherspoon had run before. They had a lot of people in their camps. A lot of support already going into a campaign. Jeremy mentioned how short the campaign was. This was very short, no time to kind of drum up interest or get new members, and that shows in the turnout of the votes. Trent Wallerspoon got more votes in second place than Carla Beck did winning on Sunday, which is, I mean, that has got to be a shock to the NDP. I mean, of course, the leadership will know this. Carla Beck will be aware of this. This won't be surprising to them, but it's a huge issue, I think, for them. And that's the reason why Carla Beck's like, to this week, we got to go everywhere. We got to get in people's living rooms. We got to get to where they work. It doesn't matter who they are, who they voted for, what job they do, whether they love us or hate us. We have to be there in front of their faces, showing that we want to listen to them. And I think that's maybe a little bit of shot at the previous leader, not coming out and saying that. But she's saying we're not scared of anybody. We got to be meeting people in the middle. And the only way the NDP can really grow in their membership is by getting those people back that were previous members, but also by attracting people that used to vote for them when they were in government, people that went to the SAS party or people no longer engaged in the party. So they have a lot of work to do. I think they're acknowledging that. I don't think they're hiding from it. And that's why they're going on this big, around the province in 21 days. So we'll see what comes of that. But the big takeaway for me again is just the low membership numbers and the low voting turnout.
I was just fascinated by that because you're right. It's 56% less people vote, and New Democrats voting this particular leadership than was last time when they had over 10,000 members at least voting, and that's significantly low to 20 years ago when they were voting for the premier at the time, and Lauren Calvert, and they had close to 20,000 people voting. We're dealing with a situation that I found it fascinating. I know it's not terribly comparable, but you have 45 SAS party MLAs that garnered more votes in their ridings in the last election than Carla Beck did. Now, I get it. It's not, there's a huge difference between a leadership candidate and somebody running for the riding and voting in either case, because is far greater commitment when you're running for working for a political party, wanting to elect someone in that political party, in the sense that you're dealing with a situation where you have to pay for a membership and everything else. But this is the only opportunity they have to do so. And the SAS party last time around, they actually encouraged people to go out and buy memberships. Didn't seem to be terribly worried about the party being taken over by foreign forces. They encouraged, and a lot of teachers did go out and buy memberships, and that's how they basically created a fair bit of buzz and a fair bit of interest in what was a fascinating leadership candidate. I want to talk about the room though, and I don't want to put too much emphasis on the room because it was a very small room, and most people voted online, Jeremy. But what was your sense? I didn't. They kept talking about younger people. Um, God, I looked at the room and I would consider most people in that room old, and that's from my perspective. Like, I mean, I have a very different definition of old than you guys do, and when I saw that room and saw a lot of tributes from old New Democrats there, I wasn't suggesting. It wasn't suggesting to me there was a lot of energy. What was your sense, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's a really good point. This was my first actually governing, or not governing party, but party convention I've actually been to. And you're right, it was a lot of older folks in there. And I think you pointed this out in your column too, but when people went up to clap, they took their time to get up and clap for either Carla Beck or Caitlin Harvey.
I felt at home there. Yeah. Be able to stand it slowly. But sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
so no, it just does show that this party does have an aging membership. I know they say they're trying to attract new members, and you do see some youth there, but it was an older crowd. It's hard to say who they voted for or how, but you could assume maybe it was more the Carla Beck, I would imagine, over the Caitlin Harvey, just on the issues and how she was pitching herself. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, I still think there was a lot of happiness there, a lot of clapping, a lot of cheering, especially when there was some Métis jigging happening on the stage and that sort
Orange
of thing.
Blossom Special. Yeah.
Oh, yes, so I think people were feeling pretty good about it, and are happy to see Carla as leader now.
What about you, Adam? A lot more jigging than there was rap there. I couldn't help but notice. Like,
Yeah, just your rapping. I was at the last convention, and I think there was a lot of tension in the room. There was a lot at stake. You had two, as I said, elected MLAs. They were from pitching different ideas. They had, very loyal supporters there. It was there was a lot of nervousness. There was, I think, maybe a sense that Ryan Malley might win, but it wasn't a foregone conclusion. I think there was more certainty with this race for sure. And I think after that, there were a lot of people that left that room that were disappointed. And I remember distinctly seeing, and I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, but I remember distinctly seeing MLAs in the NDP caucus in the room where we were doing the interviews afterwards, upset, like visibly upset that Trent Wotherspoon didn't win. And that was an issue I think that Ryan Malley always had to deal with, that he had to try and win over people that weren't supporting him as leader. Maybe they, eventually did. And there's been a lot of talk about that, whispers and rumors and whatever else since then. But there is definitely more of an advantage for Carla Beck now within the party, within the caucus, because she doesn't have to fight with her own caucus to get support. She's not trying to win them over. She had more than half of them, support her. Doyle Vermette introduced her. He's a very popular member of caucus. And I think that is something that she has in her favor. The disadvantage she's going to have is, as I said, she has to sell herself to the people of Saskatchewan now. And she also has to sell herself to NDP members who've let their membership slag or decided not to vote or voted for Caitlin Harvey. If the party wants to move to get younger, one of the major issues that young people care about in getting involved in politics is climate change. We see it at the legislature with rallies. We see it when people engage with us on issues, emails, and social media. This is something that young people are engaged with. That's something Caitlin Harvey tapped into. Whether the party was ready for it or ready for her message is not really the point. That's something that you're going to have to speak to. And Carla Beck eventually is going to have to come up with a message on where we stand on, she's saying we don't want to make it the environment versus the economy, but there is always going to be a bit of that debate in Saskatchewan. And that's something the Saskatchewan party is going to try and paint the NDP into a corner on. Yesterday, I know Jeremy asked her about pipelines in the scrum afterwards. Really tried to peg her down on a number of issues. And throughout the campaign, I think her strategy was just like, don't fumble the ball, don't say anything, don't tarnish the brand. She had a lot of, people both in her caucus, supporting her and people that are within the party that were doing, media relations for her, that are party supporters. And I think that helped her cause and helped her message. But now it's going to be, okay, where do you stand on this? How are you going to convince people in Southeast Saskatchewan to vote for the NDP? She said, we're going down to Shand. We're going to go down to areas in Estevan, Weyburn, talk to people. We're going to go to Shellbrook, she said today, which is the premier's backyard. I'll be interested to hear what those conversations are like. But they're going to have to confront those conversations of what your policy is. And when you run a campaign that's not really talking about policy much, those conversations will come up sooner rather than later, maybe even this week. So again, today her message was affordability, which is what we heard during the sitting, education, healthcare problems, people leaving the province, the GDP, shrinking, the deficits and the debt the Sask party has. And I think that's going to be something we hear consistently. But selling, the policy is the next thing. And that was one of the major differences between Harvey and Beck, was Harvey was selling policy and Beck was selling a vision on, we have to join together. And I think today it's interesting seeing, I've seen some here tweets, Caitlin Harvey's really extending the olive branch to Carla Beck and the NDP right now. And I think that I came away with it yesterday hearing from her that she had a positive experience in all this, that despite maybe some of the suggestions or the division that may seem out there, that she is not, leaving the party. She's not trying to start a new party. She wants to be the nominee for Meewasin, which Carla Beck said was her first big test. And that will be a big test. That hasn't been an easy seat for the NDP. That Ryan Malley had to, work hard to get that seat. And the NDP lost the last by-election they expected to win. So that's going to be fascinating.
Well,
I'll
that's
just
a good
add real quick.
Yeah,
they're
please,
going
Jeremy. Because I did ask about that.
No, they're going cattle branding. They're going to brand some cattle later this month. So, that just kind of tells you a little bit about where they're going with that. But I want to pick up on the pipelines thing, because I think that's the question that causes a lot. It doesn't cause division, but that's kind of the line where people set themselves on. If you're pro pipeline, anti pipeline, whatever, you ask any politician that's where you get a sense of where they are and how people feel about it. So that's why I did want to ask her about it, because I think it'll be a big question going into 2024 and that sort of thing.
And
Where
I
do you see
caught, sorry,
Jeremy?
Jeremy, I
So go
caught
ahead.
what you said. We support federally regulated pipelines. So she didn't say we support all pipeline projects. She
No,
supports the ones that have been approved, which, I mean, that's like, you're not going
it's
to
a
take
safe answer.
It's a safe answer.
Well, that's an interesting thought, because is that going to go over well with those that were supporting Harvey or Harvey herself? I guess I'll start with you, Jeremy. How do you incorporate not just Caitlin Harvey into the caucus by having her run and whatnot? Because that may or may not work, but I think it'll take a little bit more than that. The people that got behind Caitlin Harvey really seem to want to send that strong environmental message. And if she is saying, and I think she rightly should be saying this, that she found this to be a positive experience where she's made a difference, there's going to be huge pressure on uh, Carla Beck, and it's going to come from Caitlin Harvey and Caitlin Harvey's supporters to do more on the environment and whatnot. Where do you see the divisions happening? Because they were happening even before the convention started. The Saturday and Friday, there was people tweeting who claimed, like Emily Eaton, not to be part of the party, but basically saying that, yeah, I'm hearing that there were 6 people or 5 people that in caucus that really wanted Ryan Miley out, and they weren't buying into the stories that we were writing. From the politicians themselves, basically saying, no, there's no division here. They still think there's this division, and more importantly, they still think their issues aren't being addressed. So, Jeremy, where do you think that Carla Beck is going to find some bridge, some ability to reach out to those people? She told both you and me during this process, and Adam, that she can pretty much sit down in a room and talk to anybody and find similarities. Where will she find that with the group that, at least internally, is going to be the most problematic for her initially?
Yeah, for sure. I think she's going to pitch herself as we're the party that cares about climate change still, and that we care about emissions. And so, if you want to be a part of a party that actually will address some of these things, we're a party for you. She's said, Scott Moe doesn't care about emissions and climate change and that sort of thing. So she's going to pitch it as a way, I think, that, well, join forces with us. We're the only other viable option for government. So if you want to be part of government and actually want to see change in this province, will be able to deliver on some of those things you're asking for. I don't think she's going to go guns blazing though, like Caitlin Harvey, right? She wants workers to have the jobs that they have already, and she's already said that. And she's gone to Weyburn, the oil and gas show in Weyburn. So she is going to have to find that line, but I think she's going to try and pitch herself as the party that will still do some things on climate change and get there, while the Sats party won't.
Yeah, well, good. Adam, I don't know if I see where that line is for Carla Beck, because I do say that line is a deep divide, and I don't think that some people in the party particularly care about the notion that, we must. This is our only way to form government. Maybe they're under the view that they can't form government anyway, so they might as well just make as much noise about this particular issue or other issues as possible. But am I missing something? Is there a better line that you can identify that I think I might be missing in terms of how do you bridge these? The pitch was awful hard, strong and awful hard this weekend on Scott Moe directly, and Scott Moe not being not just a very good premier, but perhaps Scott Moe being a little bit more of a personalized attack on Scott Moe, and otherwise. I did notice that. Can they come together on that and set aside the notion that we're just not doing enough policy on issues?
I think every political party has, factions that don't like the leader, want the leader out. I don't think that's, a secret. I'm not, breaking any news here. I think just the amount of people that voted for Caitlin Harvey, given the smaller numbers, is something that Carla Beck has to contend with. That there isn't people that have bought party memberships, whether for this race or not, that want to see the message that Caitlin Harvey is putting out there. But that's still a really small number. It's still a small number compared to, what, like I said, Trent Wotherspoon had as the second place finisher 4 years ago. And Ryan Miley said yesterday, we can't keep replacing leaders. We have to have some stability. To be a serious party, we have to have someone. He said, regardless of the result in 2024, he'd like to see Carla continue. And, whether that happens or not, it's so at some point you keep firing the coach after the team loses, then it's kind of on the players, right? And I think that's what the NDP is looking at right now is, they need to, come together, decide what they're about. And as Jeremy said, right now, they're not a viable alternative. Carla Beck has said that because they don't have enough seats. They have to sell themselves to these people in all over Saskatchewan and go to the rooms that she says they haven't been in to sell themselves as an alternative to the Sask Party. So at the very least, people that aren't happy with the Sask Party are going to vote for the NDP and not vote for the Buffalo Party or vote for any of these third parties. Vote for the Liberals if they have a few candidates running, right? So I think while yesterday the message between Caitlin Harvey and Carla Beck was stark, it was very different. The vibe was very different. Carla Beck's vibe was very hopeful, looking forward to the future. Caitlin Harvey's future was a lot darker. And that's not saying that she's wrong. It's just that that's something that obviously her supporters and people that are in the party that want that addressed, the party has to deal with that. Carla Beck has to deal with that. But she has so many, she said she's a bridge builder. She's going to be busy building a lot of bridges. I hope she's, get some rest because she's trying to build a bridge to the southeast part of this province, southwest part of the province, northern Saskatchewan, in the cities, going to these towns, and then also trying to bring her party together and grow memberships. They have such a low membership number right now that it's pretty surprising. But I think that's the factor of such a short leadership campaign. There was no buzz, there was no juice, and that's quite different from 4 years ago.
There's so many bridges, it's going to be like the Regina bypass. I swear to God. But we're going to close out now. We could talk about this a lot more than I thought we could, but because there's a lot to re-examine. We're kind of in summer break right now. We're headed into it where there probably won't be as much emphasis on this summer before you two take off on your holidays and mine in the summer. What should people be looking for? I guess in Saskatchewan politics, that's going to give them some indication this summer as to what direction the NDP are going. Does it begin with the tour, Jeremy? Is that sort of something that we're seeing, or is it, or we should be looking for what she says on environmental or practical policies? What are you looking for in terms of something that's going to tip her hand as to how they're going to handle some of the situations they had to deal with?
Yeah, I think it's a tour and how she's going to handle that. But I mean, this is actually, she said something about this today that really stood out to me. But um, she was talking about equalization and she was talking about a fair deal for the province. And these are messages pitched by the Sask Party. These are messages pitched by more right-leaning parties. And she said Premier Bradwell dropped the ball on those things. And so you're seeing her, I think, shift the party a little bit more to the center or whatever, even though she doesn't like left or right sort of thing. That's what she's saying right now. But I'm going to be really watching for those messages and kind of cross comparing that to what the Sask Party is saying, because it's so far it looks like they're trying to go in that same direction. Maybe not as far right as the Sask Party, but the wind seems to be blowing that direction.
Well, I could ask you the same question just to wrap up, Adam, but I want to put this thought to you. Everybody sells Carla Beck short because she wasn't Nicole Sarr, she wasn't Trent Weatherspoon, she wasn't Alina Young. She didn't seem to be anybody's first choice. But are we going to see more or this summer to Carla Beck than maybe some people thought of in terms of either political strategy or positioning or even just sort of hardline stances? Can she pull that off and start to challenge him? Because as I said, one of the things I found fascinating is how direct the language and attack was on Scott Moe, calling him a Trumpian Republican, basically calling the politics of the Sask Party ugly and not just divisive, not just friendly words, but really stark words. Can Carla Beck pull that off, and or will we sort of see her make some interesting strategic moves as Jeremy described?
Yeah, that comment about the Trump Republican, that was Ryan Miley's like parting shot on Scott Moe yesterday. But yeah, I think Carla Beck said it a few times. Our opponent's not in this room. I think that's something that she's going to continue to harp on. They just need more people in that room. That room, as you said, Marie, wasn't big enough for what that party's wants and what Carla Beck's goals are. And I said, Jeremy said that Carla Beck doesn't like saying left or right. Maybe that's because she talks about bridges again, and a bridge is a middle spot between left and right. And that's kind of where she wants to stand and be able to go back and forth depending on the issue. And that's traditionally where the majority of the voters are. People are in the middle. People are like to, be maybe on one side for one issue, one side for the other issue. And I think that's something to recognize. The other thing that I've noticed, and you guys will notice it too, of course, is that with the support of the caucus, the majority of the caucus, she's going to be able to dispatch people into certain corners of the province where it doesn't have to be her selling the message. She can send Trent Wotherspoon, she can send Alina Young, she can send Nicole Sarr, Betty Nippy Albright, Doyle Vermette, Matt Love, these people that all supported her, and not feel like she has to do it all herself, and play to their strengths and their popularity within parts of the party. And having that advantage, I think, is something that they're gonna play off of, and it's already, I think, something they've done during the campaign, and it's something I'd expect going forward. I saw the Premier congratulate Carla Beck. That was probably the last time, in a while we hear something cordial. But she did say yesterday during the scrum that doesn't matter who the political party is in charge in Ottawa. She wants to be in the room. She doesn't want to be outside the room, complaining about what they are or aren't doing. She said, regardless, it includes maybe a Conservative Party government at some point. So I think that message is different as well. And that's something I think that has been consistent from Carla Beck. And even previous to her running as leader, she's trying to, communicate with people, build relationships. And I think that's something that she's going to try and sell to the people of Saskatchewan as well.
Can I add one more thing?
Absolutely, yeah.
Sorry, Mary.
No, it's okay.
The difference in tone too is she's talking about unity, and she's not going to go against like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau like Scott Moe does. She's going to take a different approach and say, I want to kind of work and build bridges. But that's what I've noticed too, is she's not going to go against the federal government or anything like that.
Well, summer's construction season, right? So there'll be a lot of bridges being built, right? So it should be a fun. Well, thank you guys. If I don't talk to you again sometime on air, we'll talk obviously in person. But thanks for all your good work this first half of the year. We're almost to July 1st. I hope you guys get some great time off and spend time with your families. And thanks so much for joining me on Inside the Marble Palace. It's always a lot of fun. Take care, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Murray. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
All right.